This episode is brought to you by the Pelora Group.
Welcome back to Winning Through Culture.
I'm Tim Flanagan.
And I'm Amanda Kramer.
When culture's not a priority, people aren't a priority. Having an intentional focus helps you as a leader remain impactful and relevant as you move your business forward.
Welcome to Winning Through Culture.
Well, it's great to be back. Another episode of Winning Through Culture. Got a real special guest here with us today, Sam T. Sam is someone that Amanda and I met at the Purpose Summit in Charlotte. Many of you listening to this podcast have heard about our Purpose Summit experience. He was one of the main speakers. I was super impressed with his talk. I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction about Sam and his business and get into a conversation that Sam shared with the group at the Purpose Summit, Running with Scissors, which is about doing dangerous and difficult work with finesse. So, Sam, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to our conversation, Tim.
Thanks so much. So, Sam is the founder, CEO, president of a defense technology group of companies. Parts Life Inc. is the overarching entity, and a part of that company is DeVal Lifecycle Support and LC Engineers Inc. And you are involved in extremely technical, very important defense contracting work that requires a significant amount of precision, attention to detail, and really no room for error, because these are parts of equipment that are going into military, defense-related industries that need to work when they need to work. So tell us a little bit about, just a starting point, Sam, your story as to how you got the business started. I think that's pretty interesting in and of itself, and maybe we use that as a starting point.
Yes, thank you, Tim, for asking that question. So I bootstrapped Parts Life in 2007, and I had come out of working in the remanufacturing area in automotive. That's kind of where I learned about, remanufacturing. I come from a very agrarian society, grew up in the island of Sri Lanka, which is known for tea and rubber and gemstones like rubies and blue sapphires and that kind of stuff. So not very well known for, hardcore manufacturing. But I found myself straight out of college going to work for a company in Philadelphia that was the largest privately held remanufacturer of auto parts. And so they had customers like CarQuest and AutoZone and Advance and Napa. So anything that were hard parts that are used on a car was remanufactured by Cardone. And I worked for them for 12 years, really learned a lot about remanufacturing. And what you're doing in remanufacturing is you're taking an old part, which is called a core, tearing it down and then building it up again and selling it for about 60 to 70% of what it would cost in a new part. So that's kind of what I had learned to do. And so in 2007, I started my own company thinking that I was going to go back into the automotive industry that I had left a few years ago. But some or other, it was right in the middle of a recession and a very difficult time in the automotive space. I mean, even big companies like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler were having a difficult time. And so I had to pivot away from the automotive sector. I recognized that the Department of Defense needed a lot of support for their expensive and mission-critical assets. If you look at a lot of their assets, you look at the B-52, which is a great case, it's older than me and may actually outlast me depending on how long I'm going to live. But, so these are planes that were made in the early 60s that are still flying today and are a big part of our strategic weaponry assets. And so these types of assets need support, aftermarket support, if you will. And so Parts Life was able to find a niche, and we really filled that niche. I've heard people talk about the fact that riches are in the niches. And so we've been able to find a niche, and we have done a really good job of filling that niche very well. And our customers that we work for are very appreciative of the work that we do, because I tell people that there is no economic model for industry to actually work in this space, because we're talking about a high mix, low volume environment. And so a lot of companies, public companies, private equity companies, have a very difficult time working in this space because there is no economic model. But we have found a way to be able to continue to thrive, and we look forward to coming to work every day to take care of the warfighter while creating value for the U.S. taxpayer.
Well, and that's one of the things when I heard you speak back in May, I appreciated greatly is you're a part of our national defense and doing so with stewardship for the taxpayer of the United States. And as you said, niches are riches. I mean, you clearly probably don't have much competition, which allows you to focus on the quality of the product over commoditizing the product, which is always a nice space to be in as a manufacturer. So you gave a talk at the Purpose Summit, like I said, runs with scissors, doing dangerous work and difficult work with finesse. Let's talk a little bit, Sam, as a leader, CEO, how do you accept both the risk and mitigate it while serving those around you?
Yes, I mean, so if you think about the warfighter, right, when they get dressed to go into work every day, they recognize that they're putting their life in harm's way, right? And a way not to take on risk is not even to leave home or not even to get out of bed, right? That's a great way to not take on risk. But the truth of the matter is, when we take on the work that we do, we are taking on dangerous and difficult things. And so it's something that we need to embrace. And if we're not careful, we can become paralyzed with just analysis, right? And so it's very important for us from an engineering standpoint, from a technical standpoint, for us to be able to embrace those risks, understand what are all of the things that we have to deal with on that particular project. We do something called failure modes effects analysis. It's a methodology of how to manage risk or how to do quality planning from a failure modes perspective. So we have scientific methodology on how to do that, but it also comes down to leadership, right? It also comes down to how do we practice that and be able to take on the risks that we need to take on, be able to mitigate it as a way to be able to continue to move projects forward, because a lot of the work that we do ends up going on very critical applications. And so it's just part and parcel of what we have to do.
Yeah, and you mentioned the leadership aspect. That is, again, recognizing the precision and specialty nature of what you and your team does. How do you see the leadership framework perhaps being a little bit different in your business maybe than in a mainstream industry? Or is it? It may not be, Sam.
I would say one thing is that we embrace quality to make sure that, so quality, we actually teach quality, right? It starts off with the fact that quality starts with the customer requirement. So the system of quality is a customer requirement. The standard of quality is zero defects. Then the way that we measure quality is price of nonconformance. And so these are ways that we are making sure that we're thinking about quality correctly, right? And then you cannot inspect quality, but you have to work on preventing quality. A good example is Philadelphia is well known for tasty cakes.
Yes, they are.
I didn't grow up eating tasty cakes, so it was a phenomena that I enjoyed after I became an American, having come to live in America. Love tasty cakes. But if you can imagine, if you had to do inspection on a tasty cake, you would actually have to taste it, right? And so once you taste it, that's destructive, right? Now you messed up the tasty cake. So how do you make sure that you can have a quality product? Well, you have to control the inputs, right? You have to control all of the ingredients. You have to control all of the conditions, like the temperature of the ovens, making sure there is no moisture there and all of that kind of stuff, the cure time. So there is a way to be able to make that tasty cake taste so awesome every single time, and you don't get to inspect it. So you have to actually work on a prevention methodology. So I would say that's part of how we are making sure that we are building quality into that process every single time. So we do a lot of training, we do a lot of development of our people to make sure that as we take on this work, that we are thinking about it correctly.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk a little bit about that because you obviously, so many businesses today are operating in a very competitive marketplace for talent, and you obviously are creating a very specialized technical product. I mean, how is, with Parts Life tackled, if you will, Sam, the providing environment? We'll get into some of it because I really love some of the things you're doing for your people. But
so we have an internal strategy and we have an external strategy. So I'll start with our external strategy. We're working with high schools, with community colleges, with universities, with trade schools to make sure that we are talking to them and continuing to always share with them what it is that we are looking for in industry, right? Because we want people, when they come out of these schools or these universities or these learning places, to be able to hit the ground running. So I do a lot of work myself, in talking at the high school level, making sure that I'm inspiring, young people to learn about machining and welding and that kind of stuff, right? So it's very important. And in fact, when I go into these high schools, I wear a very, very cool shades, like I look like Deion Sanders when I talk to them because I want to get their attention. I want to teach them that manufacturing can be sexy, right? Because
yeah,
it can come across as extremely boring. So I'm making sure that we are building an ecosystem of working with educators, working with teachers and instructors and curriculum to make sure we are shaping that as a way to be able to make sure that we are getting the type of people that we are going to be able to hire. But we don't stop there. We do a very good job of upskilling our own people. Where I'm sitting right now is in Philadelphia, and we're in a hub zone, which is a historically underutilized business zone. So, the types of people who work here may not necessarily be able to work in high tech. So we're doing a lot by taking the bull by the horns and teaching them things like machining and welding and quality inspection and maintenance. Many CEOs are out there complaining about the fact that they can't find good people. But, I'm not so sure they're actually putting a lot of effort themselves. It's a leadership issue, right? You got to be able to influence people to come alongside you. You have to create a culture within your own organization that actually appreciates people. I said something recently in a post that talked about, just like money, where money finds the highest return on investment, so does human capital, right? Human capital goes to where it is appreciated. And it appreciates both. It appreciates and it's appreciated, right? So we do both, right? So what we are doing is really making sure that we are doing transformational things with our people. Just because they come in one job, we don't necessarily keep them there. We are building pathways and pipelines as a way to continue to grow these people, as a way to be able to help them to be successful in their work.
I loved what you shared with going into the high schools and junior college trade schools, because to your point, that's a segment of the population that might not get a lot of opportunities, and you're showing them how to have a fantastic career in, again, high-tech manufacturing. And I love, the reality. That's a great term. I wrote that down. I'm going to be borrowing that from you, Sam. But appreciate people to have people appreciate. And that's so much, I think, lost in business today that, people just expect people to show up and they pay them and they expect them to do a good job. And that's one of the things, again, as I got to know you earlier this year, I was super impressed by is you're taking that real concerted personal effort to give people a chance and then give them the environment to really thrive in. As you think about creating that environment, and you talked a little bit about Finesse, what does that mean to you in the context of just managing the day-to-day of the business?
I think the truth of the matter is we are setting a standard, right? And I set that from a leadership standpoint, so making sure that we know where we're headed, what types of customers are we working with, what does our alignment look like? Because if you look at a company, right, we're working with limited resources. We're not the government that has unlimited resources. So it's very important for us to make sure that we are taking our limited resources when we are being good stewards about it. And I'm all about stewardship because I see myself, if I can think like a steward, the outcomes are going to be fine, right? Because we are thinking in terms of the taxpayer, we are thinking in terms of the people who are actually using our equipment, we are thinking in terms of making sure we are being good stewards to the earth as well, right? So, for instance, we do a lot of subtractive manufacturing, which means we create some scrap in stuff like aluminum. We make sure that rather than throw it away or sell it and put that money back into the business, we actually fund a benevolent fund to make sure that there is some margin for people, when their car breaks down or they need a washer or a dryer that they didn't budget for, they have the ability to go into that benevolent fund as a way to get some money to pay for that stuff. And I don't manage that. I don't lead that. We have a process by which, that gets dispensed. Sometimes I find out about it, but for most parts, I know nothing about what goes on there. So we have created that type of margin to make sure that our people are well taken care of. But the finesse comes in to make sure that we have exacts, right? We have a production schedule that we have to build on a monthly basis. We are scheduling our machines. We are scheduling our people. We run a tight ship because it's not how much you pay somebody, it's what you get for what you pay, right? So it's very important when people come into work every day that they're coming into work. Yes, you can have a chit chat. Yes, part of being in a culture that's positive is you have the ability to have fellowship one with another. And I think that's one of the problems that we see out there, right? There's a lot of people working from home. There's a lot of anxiety, but people who come to work every day with purpose, those people are not anxious. I don't have any nervous Billies working for me, because we make sure that we are a people with purpose and we're working every day. That gives people the ability to be able to create value and feel appreciated. And then when they go home that day, they feel good about what they have done.
Well, and clearly you're in a business that requires people to show up at the office. When you're manufacturing things, people can't take those pieces of equipment home and do that in their living room.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, that's a theme that's come up on our podcast a lot, and I just continue to see that. And it seems to be swinging back now, where even like Amazon recently required 5 days in the office. But if there's a lesson from this post-COVID environment for business owners, it is that it's very difficult to build culture when people aren't there. Talk, if you would, Sam, a little bit about kind of expounding on something you said specific to creating that culture of purpose, because I think that's, again, how have you, in essence, connected the purpose of the companies that are a part of Parts Life Inc. into the employees' jobs? Because I think that's a great story, again, as to how you've done that.
And I think, Simon Sinek talked about starting with the why, right? And so we have a vision, we have a very strong vision, we have a mission, we have core values. And then from there, we get into good performance indicators, right? And we look at performance indicators 5 different ways. Being a faith-based business, having Christian values, we look at how we do our ministry first. And then we look at revenue, we look at operations, we look at our financials, and then we look at our people, right? And so, I think it was Mike Proctor who called it the balance scorecard, where they look at 4 things, the revenue, the operations, the finance, and also the people side of it. We have a 5th element, which is the ministry side of it, because we believe that we are here to achieve a larger purpose, a bigger purpose. And so we are looking at these 5 things. We are constantly measuring them, right, as a way to be able to improve that. And we try to attack the process rather than the people. We're not always successful with that because sometimes, there is finger pointing. And so part of my responsibility as the leader is to make sure that we are not necessarily pointing fingers at each other, but are actually focused on the process, right? Because it's the process that provides a zero defect part. Yes, people work on it, but when you're struggling or when you're not creating zero defects, it's not necessarily a people issue, it's a process issue. So we need to attack the process with everything that we've got without attacking the people. And so that's something that we have to work every day. And so I can't do that from a helicopter. I can't do that soaring, 30,000 feet above sea level. I got to be here. I got to be present. And so not only me, but my leadership team has got to be present. Our leaders need to be present. We are constantly training our first level supervisors, making sure that they have, good communication skills, good change management skills, because, sometimes you find people in transition, having had a lot of refugees and, new immigrants come in to work for us. These people are in transition, and assimilation is important. So it's something that we focus on. It's a time of insecurity, and how we handle those things, making sure that we are providing the stability of working in a job every day and giving them a positive environment and treating them in a way that they ought to be treated is very, very important as part of building that culture and building that culture of purpose, if you will.
Yeah, and I think as a business owner myself that puts ministry first, which is not necessarily a mainstream concept in our society, but it definitely, just to listen to you talk about your people, it is a people first approach, and it, I believe, makes a very significant transformational difference in a business. It's, I think, to too many people counterintuitive, but for those of us that do it, we know the challenges of it, but we also know the rewards of it. And you've mastered that with your team exceptionally well. So,
yeah. And one thing I would add to that is, a lot of leaders, look at the financials constantly. I'm somebody that doesn't look at the financials often. And my CFO told me, don't tell the bank that, but I don't. I manage the game, right?
Yeah.
The scoreboard is going to reflect the performance on the field. So I manage the performance on the field, and the scoreboard will take care of itself. And God has a way of taking care of the finances. I go out there and I do the right thing by our customers, do the right thing by our employees, do the right thing by our suppliers, because, sometimes customers tend to leverage their suppliers too much. So even there, we are careful, because the Bible talks about, leaving margin for people who are serving you, right? And so it's important that even our suppliers need to make a profit if they need to continue to be around. And we are only as strong as our weakest link, right? And so a lot of times people talk about customers and employees, but they forget about suppliers. And we had a recent issue where one of our suppliers was having cash flow issues, and he came in and talked to my COO and basically told him that he would give us better terms if we would pay him faster. My CEO asked me what I thought about it, and I said, listen, if he's having cash flow issues, we should probably not be getting better terms from him at this point. Let's just continue to pay him. Let's pay him sooner and quicker for now, and we'll talk about terms when he's cash rich. Now's not the time to squeeze him.
When he's stabilized. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to leave margin out there, even for the people that serve us as suppliers.
Well, and everything you said there, Sam, is all about stewardship,
Yep.
up and down the line. You talked about process, and obviously that's incredibly important in a manufacturing facility business. There's quality standards, all of the things. You've got, again, defense contracts. You've got other people externally looking at your quality standards. And we do have a saying, again, in our business about process: be hard on the process, not the people. And we took our own organization over a year ago now through a process mapping exercise that I will tell you everyone groaned heavily over, but it was incredibly insightful in the sense that we had never done it. And as we did it, and you visualize that, and there's as you know, Sam, you're in manufacturing, there's a process to process map. It was very interesting to see as a business where things were not working historically, where we were getting hard on the people, that the process either wasn't what we thought it was exactly what it was, and was serving no one well. How have you tackled process in your business, or what recommendation would you give to other business owners? Because again, we're in a service industry in our sense, we're not manufacturing anything, but I just kept seeing the frustration of things not going as we might hope for or expect. And it was recommended to me that we do this work. And again, I saw the value in it. My team eventually did, and we're all better for it. But how would you recommend a business approach that?
Yeah, I think sometimes you have to cool the temperature down, right? Because sometimes teams are at each other's throats. And as a leader, and I have children working in my business, and sometimes it involves my children. And I have to cool my children down and say, son, this is not because this person is doing this. This is a process issue. And the fish stinks from the head. And as a leader, it's my responsibility to provide some guidance and some direction on this. So sometimes you have a lot of turbulence when you don't have a good process or the process is broken. And it's our responsibility as leaders to take the temperature down, take ownership of it, number one, right? The fish sting from the head. Take ownership, number one. Number two, cool down that temperature and then figure out a way to be able to make value flow, right? And so when value is not flowing, sometimes people are at each other's throats, and it's our responsibility to provide context to it, to say, hey, this is something that we need to work on. We need to put a good system in place. Sometimes that would mean technology. Sometimes it means software. Sometimes it means visibility, providing visibility between a customer and a supplier. Internal customer supplier relationships are very important. And how do you measure whether things are improving between customers and suppliers by providing that? Sometimes it's providing good requirements between customers and suppliers and providing good standards to say, here is how you're going to do something. And sometimes these are complex issues. And for us to figure that out is very, very important. Yesterday we had one of our customers in on a very complex project that we are working on. We are working on remanufacturing the launchers that launches both the bombs and the missiles of the F-18 aircraft. And it's a very complex item with a lot of complex processes. But because our team knew exactly how to break it down, we knew how to communicate, to set the standards. And in remanufacturing, it's even more difficult to set a standard because you are working with used parts many times, right? So you have to use pictures, you have to use descriptions. And so, some of this comes from a lot of experience, right? And so it's important for us to be able to provide context to our young team, make sure we are teaching them. And it takes patience. I tell people that I have a big vision, but I play small ball. I went to see the Phillies a couple of days ago. Everybody wants to hit a home run. But I have found a way to win by playing small ball, by getting people on base, right? By doing the little things that matter, getting the blocking and tackling right. You can win big by doing the little things right.
Yeah. No, I used to coach baseball, and on base percentage is important. And yeah, the ability to bunt, get singles and doubles wins games. So everybody's swinging for the fences, and it's fun when you get that. But yeah, to your point, it's the day-to-day, maybe not so attractive part of the game that is what wins the game. So
yeah, that's right.
And the Phillies are doing well still. They're in first place.
They are.
Correct? Yeah. Yeah. So having grown up in Philadelphia, I can claim them as my team, even though I'm in North Carolina. Yeah. Also a Braves fan. So it's tough to have two teams in the same division. Yeah. But I'm always happy about one of the two of them. So
yeah.
You talk a lot about, there's so much wisdom in everything you're saying, Sam. You talk a lot about employees. You talked about the benevolence fund. You've got another part of the business that I believe you're still doing, which is helping people purchase homes. But you mentioned that some of the people in your workforce are immigrants, brand new to the United States. What are some of the things you're doing, and I would say innovatively, to care for your employees? And again, I know you're doing a lot of training. You're really providing people clarity of standards and expectations. But what are you doing beyond that? Because I know you are doing some really neat things. Why don't you talk for a moment about that?
Yes. I think it was a pastor that was in the Carolinas who wrote this book, Neighborliness, which I read, that said that in order to create a real social change, you need four things. You need a job, you need healthcare, a place to live, and training. And, we have found a way to deliver all four of those things through our businesses. And we have helped over 25 individuals buy their first home, right? And even for me in 2007, when I bootstrapped my company, the capital that I used was downsizing my home and then using that as collateral. In 2017, when I bought Deval out of bankruptcy, I had to put my home as a collateral. So I recognized the importance of owning your first home. And in a capitalistic society, that's the way you build collateral. There was a Chilean economist who talked about that, and I took that to heart. And we've done a pretty good job of helping people buy their first home, because when you have a home, now you have stability. You have a neighborhood. Now you go to the local school. Your children are playing ball in the local Pop Warner and that kind of stuff, right? And so if you think about it, being an immigrant myself, one of the most important things that I have done is to assimilate very well into the US society. And that is a big problem today, especially if you look at Europe. Europe has created a second and a tertiary class of people. And if we are not careful, that could become the American story. But the truth of the matter is, the American dream that I pursued, 30 something years ago, was that American dream, right? Where every single person, no matter what color, no matter what background, no matter what school you went to, right, you could become part of that American dream. And I had an opportunity in the last 2 weeks. I attended two fundraisers for two people. One who's running for Senate, a gentleman from South Korea. His parents came here 50 years ago. Within 50 years, he could become the senator for the state of New Jersey from South Korea. I went to another fundraiser of a lady whose father was from Greece and the mother is from Cuba, right? Same thing. She's a sitting congresswoman running again. So these are first and second generation Americans who are now representing other people, other Americans in Congress. This cannot be done anywhere in the world, right? And this is something that is worth working for. And it starts with assimilating people, and it starts with home ownership and providing people work and making sure that they have a place to come to so that they can achieve their God-given potential. So I tell people, my personal mission statement is to create an environment where others can achieve their God-given potential. Because I believe when God created us, He created us in His image. He put purpose and potential in us already. That is God's job. I cannot create purpose and potential for somebody else. But what I can do is to create an environment, right? It's like a goldfish. A fish in water is beautiful, right? The way it cuts through the water is a sight to see. But a fish out of water is exactly that. And so that's what it means to create an environment where somebody can achieve their God-given potential. So again, there are some people who leave us, so we feel like we have a pretty good culture, but we have people, young people, older people who left us. But you know what? I am only responsible for them while they are here.
While they're there. Yep.
While they are here, it's important for me to make sure that I'm being a good steward. And for some of them, I continue to give them career advice. I stay involved with them. I don't take it personal when they leave me, because I recognize, because if you think about America, right, one of the most important things about an American is that we have choice, right? So where you work is a choice that you have as an American. I have a son who doesn't work in my organization. He decided he wanted to go do something else, and I'm good with that.
Yep. Now, a lot of wisdom in everything you said there. I mean, with the exception of the American Indians who were here before all of us are immigrants. So, at some point in time, and that's what makes the American dream, the American experiment, what it is. And I just thought it was really neat for you to talk about that program you have for helping your people get their first home. And it's a very powerful thing. And yeah, people will be with you for a season. Maybe that season will be long. Maybe that season will be short. But as a leader, I know you're very committed to being the best steward you can to give them everything to be a better person when they left, when they left you than when they came. So that's a real testament to your faith. Our personal purposes, by the way, are shockingly close to one another. So it was really neat to hear you say that. I'm like, wow. And I think it comes down to, as a business owner, and again, it's a choice. I know plenty of business owners that are just focused on the bottom line and making money, and that's it. And people kind of become a tool in that. But it's just refreshing to talk to someone like yourself that, realizes that people are the assets, and the investment in those people is what creates the real eternal value and long-term value for the business, day to day. So, well, maybe some parting advice, Sam, final advice for leaders that are, again, you're leading both a very innovative company and a very people-centric company in a very technical field, doing incredibly important work, as being a part of the national defense apparatus. Any final thoughts or advice to leaders that are looking to emulate some of the things you've done at the Parts Life or businesses?
I would say a couple of things. I said, number one, my father used to say, focus on the little things and the big things will take care of themselves, right? So I am somebody, I have a big vision, and a lot of people like to be around me because I am a visionary and I want to do big things, right? But the way you do big things is by doing the small things right? So I'm constantly haggling between, having a big vision and constantly trying to understand where I'm going and making sure that I'm looking in the horizon. It's like being on a captain of a destroyer, right? You got to have your eyes on the horizon to make sure that you know where you're going. But on the other hand, you got to take care of the sailor. It's interesting. My father was an army officer, and one of the things that he did, somebody wrote a book saying leaders eat last.
Yes.
But my father would eat first. He wouldn't eat, but he would actually taste the food that his soldiers were going to eat.
To make sure.
My father understood that the way to a man's heart is through, what he was going to eat that day, right? If the food isn't right, right? If the food didn't taste right, you can't really expect that person to show up the way that you wanted them to show up, right? And so as a leader, it's important for us to take care of the little things and to do them right. That's number one. And then number two, I think it's very important that we know how to embrace change. I think if anything about COVID, it taught us that it was very important for us. And the American buffalo comes to mind, right? The whole understanding of buffalo culture, right? Which is, it talks about how cattle in the prairies, when the storms come, the cattle run away, but the buffalo they come together, they put their heads down, and then they charge the storm. And by doing that, they actually have less damage because of it. And so storms are constant. We will always have storms. And so it's important for us as leaders to make sure that we have a strong stomach to be able to lead through those times and to recognize that we are actually made for that, right? We're not made for easy times. We are made for those times when we have to stand up and to be accounted for and to be able to do those things. And we got to trust God, right? The Bible says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? It comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And he's not going to put us in anything that he's not also going to give us the ability to be able to handle, to navigate, right? And so part of it is having faith in God, faith in yourself, faith in others around you, right? Because, sometimes the answer is going to come, right? The famous story of David, right? Saul didn't have the answer, David did. We go back to the story of Joseph. The Pharaoh didn't have the answer, Joseph did, right? So God always will provide a way forward, right? It's our responsibility as leaders to be able to look around for that right response and then to be able to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And I don't know that any more could be said better than what you just said there. So that is a perfect place for us to conclude this episode of Winning Through Culture. Sam, again, I really super appreciative of you joining us today, sharing your passion both for the Lord and your faith, and running a business of excellence that is both providing a great resource to this country and its military complex and to its taxpayers and to the people that work for you and the communities you serve, and all people that touch that are blessed by you and your work and your faith. So thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you for being with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Winning Through Culture.
Until next time, stay intentional, be impactful,
because your culture matters.